Good morning and welcome back to Planet Althistory. Today we are going to discuss what if Vercingetorix had defeated Caesar. First, let's start with a small explanation of who Vercingetorix was. Vercingetorix was a king and a chieftain of the Arverni tribe, who united the Gauls in order to beat Caesar's legions. But before turning against the Romans, he was actually working for the Romans. Yes, that may come to a surprise to some of you. He was, after all, the governor of Gallia Narbonensis in 58. He also had an interesting father. His name was Caltillus or Saltillus, and apparently he had been put to death by his own people because he wanted to rule all of Gaul, which was, well, it's very interesting to notice, right? Because we can then assume that this idea about uniting Gaul came probably not of Vercingetorix himself, but of his father, who was put to death. Vercingetorix tried to beat Caesar during the last phase of the Roman conquest of Gaul. He is credited by many modern historians to be the first Gallic or Celtic leader who could effectively unite the different tribes in Gaul, or Gallia. Most Gallic tribes had loose alliances, were starting to develop a considerable economy, and yet they had no great advantages in terms of politics, something that Rome had, being a united entity. Vercingetorix, who was said to have raised an army of the poor, and he took over Gergovia, which was a city. He was then hailed as a king by the people and also the soldiers whom he recruited. Yeah, and we should also take this with a grain of salt, because sometimes, especially in ancient sources, the enemies, they are portrayed greatly, than they even bigger than they usually were, so that the winners then themselves, they could even appear bigger and more splendid than the enemy, who was already very big. Anyway, Vercingetorix concluded alliances with other tribes, and he supported the scorched earth tactic, as well as frequent retreats to natural fortifications with other tribes, and also probably in defensive terrains like mountains, forests, and also certain settlements. What is the scorched earth tactic? Well, this means that basically when you retreat, you try to burn down everything, you try to take everything that you can, and you try to destroy everything that might be of use for your enemy, so that they cannot use it later against you. It is said that in his final battle his forces almost won, and that only due to the personal intervention of Caesar, and his reserves of course, Roman general was then able to beat the Gallic forces. But what if all of that changed? What if Vercingetorix had beaten Caesar? By defeating Caesar, Vercingetorix won't just defeat Rome. The war will most likely continue, and Vercingetorix would have to clean up certain areas from Roman legions. An immediate effect that this would have would be that Vercingetorix would have more authority and a higher reputation than he already had, something that would benefit him in the long run. His soldiers wouldn't just turn to their homes, they needed to be paid at one point, and come on, not paying your soldiers, that's going to be a big issue. As a result, Vercingetorix would try to go deeper within Roman territories and loot certain places, which would now be lacking the Roman defenses and the legionaries. This would be really bad for most Romans, and some of them would just recall 390 BC, where the Celts sacked Rome. And let's also not forget that maybe in these northern parts, we would still have certain Celts who would then also join Vercingetorix, because not all of that area was, after all, Romanized yet. At one point, Pompey would meet with Vercingetorix on the battlefield, and Pompey would get a huge front from the Senate, because the sack of Rome in 390 BC was something that should never happen again on Roman soil. As a result, Pompey would win, not only because he had a better army, but because the terrain was more unknown to Vercingetorix and his soldiers. They would then have to retreat, and Pompey would try to continue where Caesar stopped. Vercingetorix could get more alliances in the long run, and even with more soldiers gone, the ones that returned, they would bring also loot with them, which would then attract the attention, of course, of certain other tribes. Pompey and Vercingetorix would fight again against each other after some weeks or even months, but in a more familiar terrain for Vercingetorix. And this time, well, he would use his tactical know-how to his advantage and probably decisively even beat Pompey and his forces. As a result, Rome would stop expanding in Gaul, while Vercingetorix could actually found something or some sort of Gallic kingdom. Of course, the name cannot be decided because this is too speculative, but he would have a certain idea about this unification process, as his father probably gave him this idea anyway. It may not become a kingdom or empire per se, but it would become a political entity, and it would definitely come into existence. Some type of peace could be made with him, and Vercingetorix would focus his attention around other tribes in Gaul. Step by step, Vercingetorix's political entity would expand and get stronger and stronger. At the same time, Rome would still at one point see a civil war, because even with Caesar and perhaps even Pompey out of the equation, Sulla, Mark Antony, Titus Labienus and many more would exist. The reason and also the way how it could start would be very different. But it would be an invitation for Vercingetorix and his Gallic alliance to intervene and cause some trouble. I think that Vercingetorix would most likely try to conquer the province of Gallia Narbonensis for good. The countries and kingdoms around Rome would also react to the situation, and Egypt could, for instance, take a different approach. We might not only see a civil war, but a situation that was similar in Russia after World War I, where many foreign powers they sided with certain factions within the Roman Empire. Instead of applying the divide and conquer tactic in Gallia or Gaul, it would now be applied within the Roman Empire, which in itself would be kind of ironic. Vercingetorix could promise certain things to the province like Gallia Narbonensis, while Egypt would plan its own thing, and Pharnaces II of Pontus could also intervene at one point. Well, what would happen exactly, I can't really predict. But one thing is for sure. There won't be a Roman Empire. The republic of some sort of dictatorship, that could still continue to exist, and it's very likely that Rome would never even recover from the civil war, and we might see something similar as in China, where one people would conquer China and then culturally assimilate, and then it would break up again, and we would get again some conquest, and this could then go on and on and on. Vercingetorix and his successor could just make that. Conquer some parts of Rome and at the end become perhaps even Romans themselves. And we would see a similar cycle as in China, only with Rome. Another more interesting end for this scenario would be that Vercingetorix only gets some parts and annexes them into his, let's call it the Gallic kingdom, while Rome would shrink but eventually conquer certain parts back. A Gallic kingdom would have many implications. First of all, it is possible that the Gallic culture, language and traditions, they would survive for a long time, even the religion. This in itself would change history as we know it in an unbelievable way. Britain and parts of Germany as well as France will never be connected to the Mediterranean, and thus we will have a more obvious division between northern and southern Europe, or the civilized Mediterranean and the northern forest lands. A Gallic kingdom could potentially survive the Germanic invasion in much better shape and even expand at the cost of Rome or other powers that would be in that region, who would then suffer from the Germanic and barbarian invasions, be it for religious wars also, or civil wars, or other invasions that would come from the outside. If the Gallic kingdom gets to the Rhine, keeps the Alps as a good defense line and a cohesive policy, then it may even have a chance to survive for a much longer time. The political landscape of Europe, the Middle East and Northern Africa would be unrecognizable. And if the Gallic kingdom plays its cards right, it may even have the potential to succeed Rome into becoming a great power. And that's where we leave it for now. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my video. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment, support me also on Patreon, and join my forum, forum.planetalthistory.ga. Until next time on Planet Alt History.